Welcome to the Saturday Night Live Afterparty. This week, we're discussing SNL's Season 46 premiere with host Chris Rock and musical guest Megan Thee Stallion. I'm Catherine Coleman, and I'm joined this week by Steve Finn and John Murray. If you'd like to connect with any of us, you can do so at snlpodcast.com. Enjoy this full-length, patron-only version of this week's discussion. And if you like what you see, you can get all of our unabridged, ad-free video coverage of Season 46 exclusively on patreon.com/SNLpodcast, as well as subscribestar.com/SNLpodcast. It's our supporters who make our show possible, and we are so thankful to everyone who's already come on board. All right, here we go. Woo! SNL's back, baby! Mm-hmm. With nasal swabs and a new title sequence and a whirlwind of crazy political topics. We had quite some stuff to work with.
Yeah, it definitely was a fraught show, a loaded show, a charged show. I think I prophesied last week that it was basically going to be politics, COVID, politics, COVID, politics, COVID, politics, COVID. And I think that might be what we've got. So I'm excited to break it all down.
Yeah. Well, before we get too far into it.
Yep. Don't let me get ahead of you.
Let's hit on some of these news topics. We got some host announcements for the next 2 weeks. On October 10th, we'll have Bill Burr and Morgan Wallen. And October 17th, we'll have Issa Rae and Justin Bieber. Steve, what do you think about our hosts coming up?
Never would have guessed him. Not in a million years.
Same.
And it's not that I don't love me some Billy Burr and some Biebs, but I didn't know Issa Rae was coming up so hot and fast. I've seen her in what was it called? The Lovebirds. That was an okay movie. You know, it was got a good background noise. But I'm glad to see her getting this kind of exposure. But I have to say, Bill Burr, I can definitely retroactively in my mind see how that's such a great fit, even though I never thought about it myself. But he'll be great. And my best guess is he's there to promote Mandalorian. I can't think of any other project he's part of right now that would be worthy of SNL promotion. So that's maybe something we'll hear mentioned in the episode. We'll see.
Yeah, I totally forgot that he's involved in The Mandalorian.
He was in one episode in season 1, but I think it may have been in one and done. I haven't heard much about his involvement in season 2.
I've been told, told, but I've read that he's
coming back
in another episode in the second season.
All right. Could be that. It could just be the whole stand-up comedians usually can hold their own and fill some time. And he's proven now as an actor. I mean, he was in Breaking Bad and, knocked his little roll of Cubby out of the park in that. So he's kind of legit, right? Like, I think they understand that he's not someone that is not going to be able to bring anything to a performance in a sketch. I think that's a fantastic pick. I don't know anything about Issa Rae though. That's I'm going to be coming in cold on that one. Justin Bieber, don't need to see Justin Bieber. I'm glad he's just the musical guest. I know that for some reason he's enjoyed around there by some of the folks. But yeah, I don't know. Canada's kind of over him. I'm speaking for Canada at this point. So I don't know. Mixed bag for me.
For house, John.
That's true. I don't have great insights on any of this. I like Bill Burr. That's kind of the one name that stuck out in all of this for me. I am excited to see what they do with him next week.
Yeah, I mean, we can now say that we were dead wrong last week when we said definitely no first-time host.
Right, yes. Yeah. Shows our abilities of prediction are very limited. Sometimes SNL, their bookings are, they're inscrutable, but they prove to be inspired. Like, the reason why their booking agents do what they do, it's because they have their finger on the pulse and they can get a sense of things that are going to work on the show that maybe we can't. So that's why that's always such a fruitless game to try and figure out what the thinking is at the show. But I certainly hope that whatever it is that these next two hosts are going to bring, not to give away my review, I hope that maybe it's a step up. I hope that this helps them to kind of get their sea legs and tighten up this new format and all the new production niggles that the show has to work out. I hope that these hosts can support them in that effort.
Yeah, that'd be great. Our next piece of news is we found out just after recording this last week that they are releasing some tickets to the public. We knew that they were going to have an audience of some sort, but now we know that there's actually an online registration that you can go through for both the dress rehearsal and live show. Then there's a separate registration if you're a healthcare worker. So yeah, you can request tickets through there, and it sounds like they have some sort of screening process where they pick people, and then some people in there get put on a wait list, and some people get tickets, and everyone gets tested. So that's really cool. We're going to be keeping a pretty close eye on that in the next few weeks. I have some notifications set up. I'm definitely going to try to go to one or more so we can get some really sweet insight as to what this COVID production looks like.
Yeah, I'd love for you to be able to report back and just kind of walk through the whole process from the time you get to the gift shop to like, what are the screening procedures? How packed is the audience? Like, we got a few little shots in the show to give you a sense of how packed it was, but just to help people that want to try and do the show kind of know what they're in for and know, what some of the pitfalls might be. That would be, I think, a great service. Might as well give a shout out to one of our rival podcasts, the Standby Line. The girls over there, Jill and Amanda, they are Standby Line regulars and they get into pretty much every show. I was on Twitter last night and I saw that they were down at 30 Rock. They tweeted from the gift shop. They were in some sort of line to get into the show. They said they'd been tested. I don't know if they got in, how it all worked out for them. But if people want to know, get even more specifics just on the process of getting into the show and any insights that they may be able to offer, you should check out their podcast, Standby Line. So, hopefully between your efforts and their efforts, we'll be able to get some concrete information out in the next week or so to anyone that wants to try it.
Yeah, so you can check them out now, or knock on wood that next week I'll have all the information you need. And
hopefully, and getting into Bill Burr, that'd be a good show.
It'd be an interesting show. I was shocked to see him hosting, so I'm definitely intrigued.
Is that a very politically correct way of saying you're not a fan of Bill Burr?
No, he's fine. Okay. I'm not a huge fan. It's just he's not known for being particularly politically correct or,
Sure.
Sort of on the liberal skew of things. So I was surprised to see that pre-November 3rd.
Okay.
I thought I know they want to try to diversify a little bit, but I thought that they would maybe wait till post-election. So I was
they gotta throw they gotta throw one wild card in the mix just so they don't look totally partisan.
I'm sure he's promised to be on his best behavior.
Yeah. I mean, he's still not like crazy. It's not like having Donald Trump host,
Bill Burr doesn't have an axe to grind. He just kind of likes to call BS where he sees it, but I don't think he thinks of himself as, some sort of hardcore conservative right winger type.
Right.
He's not necessarily in lock with, the woke kind of bent of modern social whatever. So yeah, we'll see how that gels with the show. But hey, I'm intrigued because I do like Bill Burr. I think that he's deceptively more talented than you'd maybe get from just seeing his stand-up. That's what intrigues me about it.
Yeah. Well, we'll see, but we have another week to find out. So let's talk about this week's episode, huh?
Very good. Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
All right. Well, up first, even though it happened seemingly 100 years ago, the cold open was all about the insanity of the first presidential debate, with cameos from Alec Baldwin, Jim Carrey, and Maya Rudolph. Steve, how'd you feel about it?
Yeah, definitely had my curiosity satisfied. Like many of you, we were looking forward to seeing Jim Carrey do what he's been brought on to do. And I had trouble visualizing what that looked like. And now that I've seen it, I think it's a good fit. There are some times where that impression was just eerily similar to his mannerisms, facial expressions, cadence of the voice. It was all there in like an accuracy point of view, but it definitely was a good good way to prop up the whole Jim Carrey vibe of comedy and what he does to get his laughs. I think he's done something really good here, that he can be Jim Carrey through a very, very sellable Biden disguise. I think it works.
Interesting. I kind of, I was confused going into it too, and I don't feel much more clarity now. Like he did a good Biden. It was a good impression, but there wasn't anything that they specifically said that I felt like signaled to me, oh yes, this is why Jim Carrey had to do it. I'm anticipating it's going to keep evolving and growing, and we're going to see that. And I certainly enjoyed the impression, but I still am not clear on why Jim Carrey. John, what do you think?
Yeah, in some of that preseason media blitz that the show was doing, Colin Jost was out talking a little bit about him trying to work with Carrey. He said that, Carrey had a very clear idea of what he wanted, and that, they kind of powwowed it. So we know that they were batting around a vision of what they wanted it to be. I think maybe the problem with Carrey's first run at Biden is I don't think the show gave him a whole lot to really bite into. I think maybe that probably didn't help us get a first impression, a really memorable first impression out of this cold open. I think you're right, Steve. Like Jim Carrey, he's got an eye for picking up the subtlety in a character. Like impressions were his bread and butter when he was just kind of coming up as a stand-up in Toronto. So he's he knows how to do this, and you can tell that he can do it well, and just kind of fuse it with that patented Jim Carrey manic energy. So there was something to enjoy there. It just felt like everything that was coming out of his mouth was so lightweight. It was kind of hard to just see what is the show trying to say about Biden, other than he's kind of like a doddering old fool. But at the same time, somehow he's got mastery of time and space, and can, like you can get into this surreal notion that he can just pause Trump at his whim. Like I'm just really struggling to figure out what are these cold opens going to look like. Are they going to continue to kind of lean into that absurd stuff? Are they going to try and give him some teeth? At one point he parrots a line that Biden actually said in the debates of, like, would you just shut up, kind of a thing. And, the audience hoot and hollers for that. Like you can tell that people want to see, at least the SNL audience, wanted to see sort of like this mythical version of Joe Biden that can like land serious blows on Trump. Like maybe there was something there, but it seemed like all the little things that they tried were just kind of like quick in and out gags that didn't really say, this is our take on Biden. And so that's what I hope that they figure out over the next few episodes is really show us like, what is the comedic underpinning of your notion of Biden? So
like all the little things they did is really the perfect description.
It was such a grab bag.
A lot of mini sketches, basically.
The most inspired piece, as far as I'm concerned, was the framing of Kamala Harris as sort of like, this no nonsense like mom figure that just can grab them both by the ear and like, drag them out of the mud when they're scuffling. There's something funny about her, like being the grown up in the room, or just, being the one that even like Joe Biden is kind of like a little, servile puppy next to. Like you could see him just kind of like fawning over her when she came out. So I can see them laying the groundwork of wanting to say something in that vein. But it was just, it was so scattered and muddy and bad camera cuts and all these like premiere production jitters that was really kind of hampering my ability to dig this.
Yeah, it was definitely easier to watch on the rewatch because they spliced in the dress rehearsal footage.
So they cleaned it up seriously.
Yeah, the West Coast feed looked a lot better when I did that rewatch.
Yeah. But yeah, so overall, this I was excited going into it because the debate had been such a disaster. But I mean, there's also the realization of the debate's such a disaster. What really can you even do with it? I think that's sort of what we saw happen here.
I
Yeah.
think that's
we pretty
been-
much got what we expected.
Yeah.
You know, the interrupting Trump, cutting in all the time. That was pretty much the running theme of the whole thing. So yeah, things like that you kind of know is going to be addressed and be part of the main narrative of it. But yeah, it was very much a lot of joke, move on, joke, without a whole lot of connect, like you were saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty obvious stuff they were mining. And all of that telegraphing, like, let's just say exactly what the funny thing is, you know, to underscore what really happened at the debates. This is all the kind of lightweight political fare that has not really been working for me over the past few seasons. And I think maybe Catherine, you were touching on the key problem with all of SNL's political stuff is politics isn't funny right now. Like those debates, like I watched it end to end because I thought, well, you know what? I better know, you know, what happened if I'm going to watch the SNL take on it in a few days. And it was all I could do to not just shut it off because it was actually like anxiety inducing to have to
you don't
endure
even
that
live here.
yeah. So they obviously have you know, a serious task to try and mine that for comedy, and I think that's part of the problem. But also I think just wrapping their heads around, let's find the core of these characters and use that as the starting point. You know, who cares what the reality of the debates was? We don't have to touch on every little, you know, offhand thing that happened during the debates. Let's figure out what's funny about these characters and let's really start drilling into that. I think that's really the only thing that's going to save them if we've got 4 more of these before the election.
Yeah. Well, I hope they keep evolving and we get some good stuff coming in there. But for now, let's move on. For our monologue, Chris Rock discusses renegotiating how the U.S. government works. We sort of already hit on that, didn't we? John, how'd you feel about the monologue?
Oh, I like Chris Rock, but I don't think this was his best material. I think it was very much of the time, you know, like what else has he got to talk about? But I didn't need, you know, Revolution Light from Chris Rock for a monologue. Like, okay, great. You know, term limits. There's an argument to be had there, but is that great stand up? I don't know. Yeah. So there was a few fun moments, like the Idris Elba joke that got me. You know, I thought that's a great, that is Chris Rock doing what he does, like his take on the world. So it had moments, but overall just a whole lot of heavy-handed partisan stuff that I don't think it made for the greatest stand-up personally.
I think that there's some good stuff some good jokes that can be made of that stuff for sure. And I think he was starting to get onto something. I'm kind of wondering if we're maybe seeing the result of not being able to test this material out super well.
Yeah. If the Comedy Cellar was open, maybe he would have been able to workshop this for a month and we'd have a much better set. But as it stands, it feels very much like, okay, 1 a.m. I'm going to go with my notes and I'm going to work through this. That's how a lot of it really felt. Yeah.
It felt messy. Like it didn't feel particularly well rehearsed.
Yep.
Like I didn't think it was bad, but yeah, it just wasn't what I'm used to seeing in a stand-up monologue. And I think that probably has something to do with a lack of being able to test it out.
I think that's right.
Steve, what'd you think?
Yeah. Hi.
Hope we didn't steal all the good talking
Steve, are you
points.
still there?
Oh, you left some meat on the bone. No.
Good.
I thought, yeah, it might have been a little bit unpolished due to lack of rehearsal opportunities. That's definitely a viable point there. It could also be a little bit unedited in that sense, where maybe we could have scaled down the number of topics we tried to cover. I mean, sure, rush in a joke about Trump having COVID and whatnot. You know, that's to be expected. But yeah, we went from that to like voter suppression. We did cover a lot of ground, and a lot of it was very much, it did sound a little preachy at times. And yeah, that's kind of like, it did sound like Chris Rock material, but it definitely sounded like he was asked to tackle certain topics that maybe, you wouldn't normally hear Chris Rock do, even, with this kind of stuff going in the world to inspire that.
Sure.
But that's neither here nor there.
He very well may have been crafting this material because it's something that he wanted to say. I think maybe the problem was he had a whole bunch of things he wanted to say, and he tried to find some jokes to figure out how to say them. And that's not the best way to craft a joke. Like I've said it before, like with Weekend Update and, other times where the show's been really heavy handed. If it's social commentary first, joke second, then it feels preachy. It feels heavy. It feels partisan. It doesn't feel like you're just observing truth and laying it bare for us to find the funny in. So yeah, when the comedy kind of takes a back seat to you wanting to say something, it tends to be very hard to walk that line. And I don't think he quite had it nailed.
Yeah, I agree. So let's move on into our first sketch, where Action 9 News tries to contact Trace people from the Super Spreader event at the name change office. Steve, since we tried to butt you out of the monologue, you can go first on this one.
Well, it's the kind of sketch that makes you want to say, oh, come on. Funny names, punny, hilarious sounding, names that you wouldn't want anyone to have. It sounds like something you'd say was a cheap shot or, not totally inspired. These guys are just so good at coming up with these silly names. Like, if it wasn't as clever and as well done as this, we'd just be talking about how, just how juvenile it is and how we want something a little bit higher brow. But I mean, some of these names that I don't even feel comfortable repeating without the words in front of me on the screen, right? But yeah, this is stuff I can't help laugh at, no matter how childish.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When it came on, I think I actually did say, oh, come on. Mainly because it's their first episode back and we've seen this before.
Mm-hmm.
I was a little annoyed in the moment when it first came on. I was like, we had 4 months off and we're coming back with a repeat. But then it was such a well done repeat that I was totally fine with it. I think this is the best iteration of it, actually. So it totally won me over, and I became a fan of it.
I love how Pete Davidson's whole role in this is just to giggle at names. Like, he doesn't even have a line, I don't think. He's just there to stand there and
role
laugh.
for Pete.
Yeah, he's the one person that isn't oblivious, and he's also like just kind of crude enough to want to play with it in this very serious, dire circumstance. Yeah, that is the fun thing that he's able to kind of create that contrast there. I agree with you guys. This is just glorious juvenile stupidity, but at this point in the show, I was ready to laugh, and I think that's probably why this made it up to the top of the rundown. Is we had our traditional political debate cold open that had to happen because they've been promoting it for weeks. Then we had a politically charged monologue that touches on all the things that people are probably sick of hearing about. Can we just get to some goofy, charming potty humor? And yes, please. Absolutely. My wife and I, we stayed up for the premiere. Of course, we wanted to see it live. So this was the first time since the Idris Elba joke in the monologue that both her and I were like genuinely like rapid fire laughing. Like everything was working for this. Yeah. And the banter back and forth between Heidi at the desk and the man in the field, that was very well crafted. Yes. It's hard to make those puns and entendres kind of make sense when you take them in a different context, but the dialogue was, they had it sorted out. Yeah. It all worked. So yes, I liked everything about this sketch. It's nothing we haven't seen before, but darn it all if it isn't just goofy fun.
Exactly. All right. Well, let's keep it going. Up next, Chris, Keenan, Pete, and Ego featuring Meg Thee Stallion. Just want to know what you got going on under that mask, girl. John, how'd you feel about our musical event of the night?
This was fun. Probably Chris Red and Pete doing their thing. This is kind of their staple right now.
Mhm.
I liked it. It is a fun, timely observation, and they had a song that was just kind of catchy enough and at the right pace, like the right tempo, for you to be able to keep up with all the little gags that they
Mhm.
were working into the lyrics. So this was working. Again, I'm going back to the initial watch last night with my wife. We were both having fun with this. So hey, I gotta call it a win.
Yeah, I agree. I loved this pretty much top to bottom. It was a really funny concept. It was well produced, like these always are. And I like that they had that chance where the girls got to kind of turn it back around on the guys. So
Yes,
that
yeah.
because it was starting to feel a little questionable, and then like they got to be like give it right back to them, and then it won me over. And just a really fun song, and I've listened to it like 2 or 3 times today. So it's got that going for it. Steve, how'd you feel?
Felt great. I mean, they were touching on the exact reason why I just love the whole mask wearing thing. Because I
Just
don't
a
have the
mystique.
I don't have the strongest jawline, so if I can put a mask on, and here's the thing, when you're wearing a mask, nobody knows whether or not you have your mouth wide open. So I can just walk around like this, and it looks like I have like a proper chin and like a full jawline. And yeah, I look like an idiot underneath with my mouth wide open, but nobody knows. So they're like, who's that, strong chinned, handsome fellow over there? And yeah, everybody wins. But
Except for
yeah,
whoever's with you when you take it off.
Exactly. This is why you got a month and a half in. You gotta see what's under the mask.
I just never get there,
Yeah.
But all that stuff is just great commentary. This is just the new look for everyone. Just no face, just eyes. And uh, yeah, it was a great music video. I have to say, Ego just needs to put out an album because she's just legit.
Mhm.
She can lay down the flow. I mean, she's right there next to Megan Thee Stallion, and she's
Yeah.
holding her own. So
Mhm.
let's drop that album soon, Ego. I'm sure you're working on it. You got the chops, and let's drop the laughs and let's just get a proper R&B album going.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the reason why this was so much fun, because it is kind of just one joke that they play out for
Mhm.
2.5 minutes, but everyone was just delivering something a little bit better on this one. So yeah, this was definitely a thumbs up for me.
Yeah. I think all of these music videos in this area they typically always have Chris Keenan and Ego, and I know
Mhm.
Will Steven helps write them, and they're
Mhm.
pretty much all directed by Paul Briganti. So shout out
Yep.
to those guys because they're nailing it too.
Yeah, they have their little cadre. They've got a good thing going with that group.
Mhm.
And I'm sure we're going to see a lot more throughout the season.
Would have been nice to get a little bit of more Chris Rock into it.
Mhm.
He definitely seemed stitched in towards the end.
They
It
didn't.
kind of.
Oh,
No?
I was just going to say, if you watch the live broadcast, they were still working on Chris Rock's part. He had a bunch of green screen shots that were still in it with the tracking markers behind him. And then if you watch the West Coast feed, he's composited and they've got like, a real like hip hop background behind him.
Ah.
And they
Okay.
tightened that up. Like they tightened up his shots and added overlays and effects and stuff. So like, I think maybe what happened is they just had to compress it and get it down to the studio, kind of a thing. Like I think maybe there would have been more room if they'd had more time to play with that section of it.
Okay. That's probably why I had a different feeling from it the second time I watched it,
Mhm.
because
It was
I
definitely
watched the
cleaned
West
up.
Coast feed, and it was definitely uh more cleaned up.
All right. Well, let's keep going. After that, we have a boy visited by a future ghost that shows him all of the horrors of 2020, but also the great graphics of the remastered Tony Hawk Pro Skater games. So, Steve, how'd you feel about this Beck and Kyle sketch?
This was just a great failure all around, and it was fun to watch. Of course, if you take a kid and you take them into the future and you skip the whole part where you grow up and learn to care about things outside of your little Tony Hawk bubble, it's not going to make the impression you think it will. Yeah, of course that kid's going to be more focused on the graphics of the game. Like I would be, that's for sure. And I just have a sense of envy for Kyle's character, because I think we all wish we could pay a little bit less attention or be a little bit more ignorant about what's going on, because there was a time where not knowing as much was probably a little bit better for our stress levels.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So I think Kyle is a blissfully ignorant character in this. But yeah, enough of that, because this sketch takes a very odd turn, and it seems like they just needed an ending.
Mm-hmm.
And
As they tend to do.
We went with the marrying Keenan twist ending, which was a very interesting, out of left field way to take the sketch, but it made it memorable, I must say. And you could say that was contrived or unearned or whatever. You wouldn't be wrong, but I think the blatancy of all that is what is the joke here.
Yeah, like the ending is not a particularly obvious heightening moment,
Sure.
but it's certainly joyful and, a fun little thing, especially considering Cal's supposed to be like this 90s kid who would know Keenan from Nickelodeon.
Right, exactly. He's been
So
around so long
like
that totally
fun
tracks.
ending.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was a fun ending, for me, who would have been about the same age as Kyle, was in this sketch. That was a fun twist, and I really liked it, even though it didn't really follow a natural progression.
Mm-hmm.
It made a little bit more sense than breaking into West Side Story, but only a little bit.
Yeah.
Only marginally.
Yeah, there was a lot going on in this sketch that you wouldn't have seen
actually.
coming. Yeah.
Yeah. I like the idea of, him being into the graphics, because just being not living the show of 2020, it would be an interesting thing to explain to someone. And I wish that they could have hammered that home a little more. So like have Kyle react to the graphics and then Chris Rock like throw like another fact, like, also your whole neighborhood burned down.
Sure.
Like in a forest fire. Just like really like nail those details home and let him keep focusing on like the graphics,
Right.
I thought that could have made it a little bit more fun. But John, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, it's not a bad point that there wasn't, like, aside from him getting really giddy initially, and then they take, the weird turn with it. There wasn't a whole lot of additional beats to drive that point home.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, maybe there was something there. I get the feeling that they probably did a first draft of this, realized that it was kind of such a thin thing to hang a meaty sketch on, that maybe in rewrites they just thought, like, what else can we just goofy stuff? And this isn't going to be a masterclass in, sketch craft. It's just going to be, what can we throw at it to just kind of pad it out and get a few cheap laughs. I think that might be what was going on, and why we had, some West Side Story in there, and why we had the, the abrupt Keenan sitcom commercial there at the end. That's my working theory on it. I don't know. It was amusing. I did like the idea of the kid being enamored with the graphics, because video game graphics have gotten pretty amazingly realistic.
Yeah.
And I've been out of the game thing for long enough that I'm impressed. Like when I go over to someone's house and they have the latest console or whatever, and I'm like, damn. And it's all in HD now. So I like the joke, but yeah, it's like a 30-second amount of material that they just had to, keep stretching.
Right.
So yeah, I think my hot take is fun, but definitely kind of, throwaway. I don't think I'd ever be going back to find this sketch again.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, let's talk about our next one then. We have Chloe getting to show off impressions of Drew Barrymore, Reese Witherspoon, and Nicole Kidman in this parody of The Drew Barrymore Show. Now, John, you didn't realize it was real the first time you watched it.
No.
So what did you think of the sketch?
I love how blissfully ignorant I am of whatever is happening on a network or basic cable or wherever the Drew Barrymore Show exists. Yeah, when I watched this the first time, I'm like, oh yeah, that's hilarious. That if Ellen's getting all this heat for being a ball buster, that they would get this, space cadet hippie flower child Drew Barrymore type to run a talk show. Great. That's fantastic premise. But some executive actually was sitting around somewhere and actually did that. Like it's not a joke.
Yep.
That actually happened. And apparently most of the stuff they lampooned in this was all real too. I have obviously not seen any of the real clips to compare them, but yeah, apparently this isn't as far-fetched as I thought it was, which to me was hilarious. I thought this was a great sketch to begin with, but all the more so to know that, yeah, no, this is not a joke. This is the world we live in now. So I liked it on many levels. But my hot take on this is Chloe Fineman. She's doing SNL,
Yeah.
she's really, really doing SNL. Her Drew Barrymore, everyone does a Drew Barrymore because she has a very distinct cadence to her voice and vocal quality.
Mm-hmm.
But Chloe found something that I don't think I've ever heard anyone else quite master the way that she mastered. In one of the very first shots of her as Drew, she cocks her head up in a very juvenile way and her voice goes up while she lisps something in her Drew Barrymore voice. And good Lord, if that didn't channel like E.T. era Drew Barrymore. And I thought, wow, what a funny little thing to pick up on. Like, because she's not just doing Drew Barrymore in that moment. The dialogue that she was saying was referencing something about, her younger self or whatever. And she found it and she like drew it out. And I just went, wow, good for Chloe.
Yep.
So that's the one thing that I really wanted to make sure that we highlighted, that there was just a fantastic little, she's an impressionist. She knows how to find the vocal quality and she knows how to make it funny, and good for Chloe.
Yeah. Chloe blew me away here. She's been blowing me away from, all the way back to our masterclass sketches at home, and then some stuff she's put out on Instagram over the summer. I mean, this girl can do impressions and can find the funny thing in the impression. And this was just a perfect example of that. She nailed every one of them to the point that they could have easily had someone else do Reese Witherspoon or Nicole Kidman, but Chloe probably does it the best. So it was just really good and really inspired. And I think her Nicole Kidman impression in particular, I just adore. She did a thing on Instagram that was a FaceTime with Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban that I've watched several times and just like cry laughed every single time. I mean, it is an amazing impression and I'm so glad I got to see it on the show.
I'll have to watch
what
that
a sketch.
because
the Nicole
Kidman bit was so short. It was basically a single line. I was like, still, I could tell that was a very good impression. So I want to
she's
hear
very
more.
comfortable in it. Yeah.
I'm going to seek after that for sure.
Yeah, I'm hoping we get to see some more of these sketches where they let Chloe just really go crazy and do her thing. So, Steve, what did you think?
Well, I don't know why John is so surprised that this is an actual show. I mean, if you do the math and you think of all the teenagers that grew up watching Drew Barrymore pictures. That's true. They are now up with children. They're at home. They are they have become the demographic for daytime television. So
they're in bed anyways. Yeah.
Riding in cars with boys is now evolved into Drew Barrymore show. Yeah. So yeah,
I forgot about that movie.
It makes sense, just like Whoopi before her. Now, Chloe Fineman is clearly hanging on to. Bye. See you later. He had to go.
Yeah.
It was definitely a page from the at SNL at Home where Chloe was doing a lot of sketches where she was jumping all over the place and filling out basically all of the roles herself. So it seems like people on the show really liked what Chloe could do when she filled up all of the space herself and didn't kind of rely on more collaborative stuff. So it's nice to see them hold on to a few relics that worked from that era. And it's great to see Chloe just be given that little extra screen time where maybe they might throw Melissa in there to do something.
Yeah. Sounds like an unqualified win on this one. All right. Well, up next, we have our musical performances. Megan Thee Stallion performs Savage and Don't Stop, featuring Young Thug. Steve, what'd you think of Megan Thee Stallion?
Well, as a man with mild epilepsy, I am a little bit annoyed that there was no warning for this. I mean, there was a lot of spirals. There was a lot of
Strobes. Yeah.
there was a lot of strobes and
Just a lot going on.
just a lot of high contrast black and white that was a little bit tough to look at. But aside from that, I guess it was music. It had a
Hot take.
beat. I could bob my head to it, but not really my cup of tea.
That's fair.
I have not rushed out to put these songs on my playlist, but hey, it wasn't offensive to my ears, so happy to go along with the message that she was putting out there with that first song. Obviously, we should be protecting the black women, so don't get me wrong. It's not like I'm dissing the message that she wants to put out there. Clearly, we can all support that idea.
Yeah, I think
Just
anyone
wouldn't be-
that's listened to the show knows that this isn't necessarily your favorite genre.
Yeah. That's okay. I'm a human being who doesn't love all genres equally, just like anyone else.
Yeah, I think that's fair. You know, this I enjoyed these songs well enough. Again, it's not none of them are my favorite. I'm more familiar with Savage as the TikTok song, the Carol Baskin TikTok song. So
Okay.
that made me feel a little old. But there were fun performances like Steve. I thought she had a nice little political message in there that was to the point. Didn't take up the whole thing. I thought that was kind of cool. Especially with what she's been in the news for. But yeah, they were fun to watch. I enjoyed looking at it for sure. And the music, it was fine for me. John, what did you think?
Pass.
No, come on.
Oh,
Is your wife watching? What's the problem?
no. It's not. I did watch it with my wife, and not even slightly awkward in that respect, as some past performances have been. It's. I get it. I'm becoming an old fart. I acknowledge this and I accept it. Call me old fashioned, but I really, really struggle with artists that are held up as empowering to women and their music is important for the cause, while at the same time they're on a stage twerking and shaking their ass. And,
There's no shame in female sexuality.
I'm not saying that there's any shame in it, but again, call me old fashioned. I'm from an era where you didn't immediately assume that was empowering so much as exploitative. And more power to her, because she's making pretty good bank on, what she's doing. I'm not, it's definitely empowering for her. But as a father of two little girls, there's a little part of me that always says, is this an empowering message that I would, wholeheartedly embrace my kids listening to? And I don't know if I'm quite there with it. So I say pass purely because it's impossible for me to divorce myself from what I see the implications of that being. And I got to have a dad perspective on it. And I wish I could be hip and with it and, just take it for the sex positive anthems that they were meant to be. But that's not where I'm at in life. So pass.
I think it's because you're old fashioned.
I am. I'm old fashioned. I'm an old fogey. I got
John Murray.
I am
Old-fashioned
very
fuddy-duddy.
I am the very tail end of Gen X. So, there's just not a lot of overlap with where our culture's at right now. And I'll be the first to admit it. And that's why, I'm happy to just keep these views to myself, because I know I'm not in step with SNL's audience right now on these kind of things. And I'm okay with that.
All right, well, that's enough on Megan. Let's get into Weekend Update. For their lead-in, Jost and Shay discussed the still breaking news story of Trump testing positive for coronavirus. So, Steve, how'd you feel about Weekend Update this week?
It was acceptable. When you are given some information so close to airtime and you know that people will be expecting it. Yeah, it's a tough, awkward position to be in. They take that risk every time they start up a new show. So having this material on Trump with COVID, it kind of felt like a Stephen King novel. Like you can tell it's a first draft and maybe it could be a little less wordy and edited, but hey, there's good writing talent involved, so it ends up working.
Yeah.
So we pretty much got a Stephen King novel of a opening salvo in terms of quality.
What an interesting take on it that
That's
was.
an apt analogy. That actually, it kind of makes sense in a weird way.
Yeah, I definitely don't envy the Weekend Update writers of today's news cycles. You know, there was a time where we could have a debate on Tuesday and that would still be what we were talking about on Saturday.
Yeah.
And those times do not exist anymore. It's a curveball every Thursday night, every Friday morning, and every Saturday afternoon. So they definitely have their work cut out for them in that sense. Absolutely. And I think that they did all right with it. You know, it wasn't a bad Weekend Update, but it wasn't a great Weekend Update. But I'm willing to grade it on a curve of we had this crazy news drop. But really the thing that was the most interesting to me was Shay just seemed a little off. Like I know that part of the bit was that he wasn't finishing the jokes because it just felt weird.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, it wasn't being sold in a way that felt right. It was coming off to me in a way of like he didn't believe in the jokes. And so I liked what they were going for, but they didn't really, in my opinion, nail that part. And like I said, I'm willing to give it a curve, you know. But yeah, I thought that they had something really good going in there and some actually good jokes that he sort of let fade off. And so I thought that was an interesting take when they had good material to go at it with that angle.
Mm-hmm.
John, what'd you think?
I'm going to grade it on a curve too. This whole episode feels very much like, first week of school. You know, we're still getting our sea legs. We're still, ramping up, finding our groove. A lot of weird camera work tonight. And a lot of highs and lows. You know, it wasn't the most even show. And Weekend Update, Jost and Che seemed similar. It seemed like they're going to need a week or two to really get their rhythm and their back and forth and just start to tighten things up and start to feel like they're really on top of their game. It is interesting that with so many things happening in the news that it felt like a lot of this was not very memorable. Like I would have thought maybe Che would have had one of his really stunning multi-part jokes where he calls them back and he builds on it and he kind of takes you on a little journey. And he plays like his scumbag role in it. Like they have a few bits that they'd established, and I would have hoped to see a little bit more of some of what we've come to love about the Jost and Che Weekend Update. And I felt like this just maybe it's just because they were trying to hit all the key topics that they didn't dig deep enough on any of them. And it could just be we haven't had to sit down and really cram and churn out a Weekend Update in a while, and it just doesn't flow as fast and furious as it does once you're mid-season. So it was acceptable. There were moments, but yeah, obviously it's not going to be a high watermark for Weekend Update for the season.
It wasn't too fast or too furious.
No.
It felt like that's what they were going for with the Che bit. But they just didn't hit it like they have in the past.
Yeah, just
and I really
a little more
liked that
lightweight
bit in the past.
Yeah, it's just everything was a little more lightweight for some reason, and it just I'm ready for something a little meatier, and I hope that over the next few weeks you see that, even if it's just a slow incline of them just getting back up to speed to where they were last season. That's all I'm hoping for. Just a little bit better week over week.
Yeah, and I'm sure they'll get there.
Mm-hmm.
But for now, let's discuss our first feature, which is Chinese trade daddy Qin Biao discussing TikTok's U.S. buyout. John, what'd you think of this Qin Biao appearance?
it was a breakout character for Bowen. It still got heat. This was a great topic, obviously. Why wouldn't we want to touch on TikTok? I'm sure that as soon as that dropped, the gears started churning. The gear started turning, and I'm sure that Bowen's been tinkering with this, or whoever he collaborates with on him. They probably realize, yeah, this is something we're gonna work into the show. I was glad to see him back. Anytime there's something fitting and it's organic and it makes sense to bring back a character like this, of course, yeah. So obvious win, easy win.
Yeah, I think it's Sudie Green and Jasmine Pierce that work on this with him.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And this was a knockout of the park for me. Home run, I believe, is the sports ball term for that. And I thought this was actually probably my favorite Chin Biao so far. He came in hot. He had some things to say. They had that nice TikTok thing at the end. I thought that they were just really hitting joke after joke, and every one of them worked for me. So it was a definite win.
For sure.
Steve, what'd you think?
Just great to see Chen Biao again. I'm so glad they have Chen Biao in their pocket. There's always going to be some China-related news, whether it's TikTok or Huawei or the protests. There's always going to be a need for some kind of link with Chinese relations. And Chen Biao is perfect to have for that because he's just so high energy and confident and willing to go anywhere that he can always have a really great entertaining perspective on whatever the China relation topic would be. And TikTok was a huge one. Like Catherine was saying, it was kind of too big to ignore. And it's great to see Chen Biao back with the first episode of the season because he's just such a fan favorite. And we're also happy to be back in the studio having a proper looking weekend update that, we probably want to see some familiar faces starting off. Probably the best way to go.
Yeah, definitely. I think that was a wise choice to put him in here on the premiere.
They chose wisely.
And let's talk about our second feature, which is Carrie Crum recounts the event of her latest vacation home for the pandemic. John, how'd you feel about Carrie Crum?
This is one of my favorite things that 80 does on the show right now.
Mm-hmm.
80's done a lot of great things over the years, but when she's the innocent child, like the kid in the porn movies that is totally oblivious, that thing that 80 does is really strong. So for them to be able to spin it up into this, I think this is probably our third time with this character, and I think everyone has been a hit. I really like him. I don't know. I'm not gonna say anything that I haven't already said before, but it's just a charming character. And honestly, like in a show that's as like politically heavy and as like socially aware as this episode has been so far, this just kind of feels like a breath of fresh air in a way. Just something that you can just really take on innocent, obvious, simple terms. And there's nothing else in it other than just the wide-eyed wonder of a child. And I don't know, it charms me every time. So high marks for 80 on this one.
Yeah, I think this is a great character. I've enjoyed it every time. And what really sells it for me are all of those ultra specific details they managed to put in here. Like when she was talking about the hose in the driveway and she said that the water tasted like dirt and metal, I could immediately I was like, oh yeah, hose water did taste like that. Just A+ specificity on the Carrie Crum bits, and that's what really sells them. In addition to, 80 plays that character perfectly, but the writing is really sharp. So this was a win for me.
Do we know, is Anna Dresden in the mix on this? Because this feels like it might have her voice in it, but I don't know who works on it either.
I don't know, but I feel like you're right. It definitely has a Dresden-esque feel to it.
Yeah, we should look that up.
We'll have to look into it.
Yeah, it definitely has that specificity that we've come to know from that group of ladies.
Steve, what'd you think?
Carrie Crum. Oh, what an adorable little girl she is. And she's actually perfect to talk about, uh, you know, her summer in quarantine, because she is already from such a small world. This is where this character uh, gets the quirks and everything we love about her. It's just how easily impressed she is by such benign things, and she's really not asking for much in this world. And I can't think of anybody who would have a better attitude than Carrie Crum during a lockdown, because she's happy with, her house with the two bedrooms and the and the bathroom. She's just going to be happy with whatever she's given. And yeah, she's just so great to learn about what it's like to go back to school through Zoom or WebEx or what have you. And it's so funny because I've thought similar things, when you're on all these video calls with people who are working from home, and it's like, oh, I'm seeing something I shouldn't. Like, that's their bed over there.
Yeah.
That's where they sleep. Like, it is. You never think about it until like you're in that meeting and you're like, this is strangely intimate. I know I'm not like there, but I'm seeing things that like I normally wouldn't see unless they invited me over to come look at their bedroom, which is
right.
Probably not where you're at with a business associate or classmate. So it's those little things that it just makes her such a real character that really leaps out of the screen. And Carrie Crum is someone worth exploring. So to have her back again over and over again is a good idea. I think she belongs as a recurring.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move in to the back part of the show. Calling all first wives, second wives, mistresses, and side pieces, it's time to be drafted into the NBA bubble with a cameo from Meg Thee Stallion. John, how'd you feel about the NBA bubble?
We also got cameos from all three of our featured players. Pretty much the only time we were going to see most of them, except Lauren. Lauren was in another sketch, but yeah, pretty much all we saw of Andrew Dismukes and Punky. So for that, I enjoyed it. Interesting premise. Like, I like the idea. I think they shot a little too low on it. It's a fun idea. Who gets in the bubble, who doesn't? But I don't know why people weren't like jousting over it or something. Like, I don't know why there wasn't another gear for this and it just became a parade of idiots. So for that, like, I feel like that's a little too simplistic, because I think it was a good idea that they were starting with. And I just would have liked to see it go somewhere a little zanier. So that's my criticism, but happy to see the featured players.
Yeah, and I'm going to echo that same thing. Just, I feel like there was more to do with it that they didn't do. The real winning moment for me, some of the characters were fun, but Alex Moffat's NBA commissioner was just delightfully funny. I really enjoyed that quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
When they start altering the ears, that's when it starts to get visually ridiculous.
Steve, what'd you think of the sketch?
I don't know. It was, I guess, funny enough. Obviously, draft picks and pairing it up with the whole bubble thing that they're forced to do for sports was a fun way of tackling it. You could really wheel in a lot of different crazy characters, kind of like the Bachelor sketches, for example. This was more of a Bachelor sketch for the sports fans. People who don't watch as much reality TV and watch more, basketball, baseball, hockey, etc. So, yeah, it's a way that we can see how the same joke can be tailored differently to different demographics and maybe land with some other people. It wasn't my favorite sketch of the night.
That said, though, all three featured players, I thought, owned it. Lauren in particular just seemed like a natural.
Yeah.
Just blended right in. She was also in the name change one.
Right.
And just felt like she had been there all along. So that was really cool. Props to our featured players.
Yeah, I wish I'd actually mentioned that during the the name change. As the wingman for Ego, she delivered her line really competently, and she wasn't drawing attention to herself. And like, she hit the line right for there to be a joke in it. And I did take notice of it, and I forgot to mention that when we were chatting about that one. So it's always nice when they get like a layup, you know, they got the ball for the first time and they do something with it. So yeah, a very small moment, but a competent moment, and great. That's what you want to see from your featured players. So
yeah, and way to bring it back around to the basketball sketch, John.
There you go. Analogies and what's nots.
Woo! All right. Well, on that note, let's talk about our last sketch of the night. A message from the Stunt Performers Association of America. John, what'd you think?
Yeah, it was okay. It was okay. It was not great. It was okay. This was a pre-tape, so I think maybe there was more that could have been done with it. I don't honestly know what it is, so I'm not going to be too critical that way, because I don't know what it is that I felt was lacking. Other than it just seemed like they were highlighting the silliness of the stunt work in kids movies, and how obviously pandering it is to a kid's sensibilities of, get the crusty old Dean. Like there was a joke there, and that was cool. I like the idea of stunt performers that's their niche. That's their bread and butter. I just don't think they took it very far. At the end, they tried to kind of have this crescendo where, the dog's attacking and the pants are splitting and the farts are flying. So they did try to do something with it, but I felt like there was somewhere else for it to go. I don't know what it was, but it just left me feeling a little wanting.
Yeah. Well, I actually really enjoyed this one.
Good.
I was having fun with it.
Good.
I love a Kate and Aidy duo. Those sketches will pretty much always win me over. But I thought this one was really fun, because I've seen a lot of those videos that they're sort of parodying. And I just thought this was a really fun angle to take on it. And I thought they had some good jokes in there. Like the way they delivered and lingered on the farting joke was surprisingly like good to me. I was like, normally I'm not like real into fart jokes, but that one really won me over. So yeah, I had a good time with this one. It wasn't, my favorite sketch of all time, but it was actually probably one of my top 2 of the night. So
very good.
Top 2.
I'm glad it connected with you, because it wasn't bad. And I want to walk back what I said just a little bit. Like, I didn't hate it. Like, this was perfectly acceptable. I think maybe what was going on was I'm checking the clock and I'm realizing, I think this might be it for the night. And this wasn't necessarily how I wanted to go out on the show. I think that may have probably, tempered things a bit for me, but you're right. There was nothing particularly wrong with it. I think I would have liked to see it. I don't know, something about it. I felt like they could have just punched up a bit more, but I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah. Steve, or which side are you going to be on?
I'm going to be on your side, Catherine, because I enjoyed it as well. I thought it was a clever idea, because as much as they want to portray it in a lot of the things you see in social media and on YouTube and stuff, stunt work can be really badass and cool, but for every James Bond and Captain America, there's a Home Alone or a Weekend at Bernie's or something where a stuntman is going to have to do things that are probably a little bit more humbling than the karate and the parkour or what have you. So it was a funny idea to think, hey, that might make a sketch. Now, if it may not have reached heights beyond that initial idea, but it did have Kate and Aidy just turning on the funny. So it is a great opportunity to see those two working together, which is always, there's stuff between the lines with those two that's always really satisfying to watch.
Cool. Well, that was it for our rundown. So let's get into our ratings.
Okay.
Let's go with Steve first. What was your moment of the night?
Okay, moment of the night. I think it has to go to Jim Carrey's lingering stare after he peps himself up to remain looking lucid. That
Yep.
was a great moment. And for a second there, I kind of lost Jim Carrey and I could just see Jim Biden. That's where he really held a face that was just like, holy crap. That is a very Biden-esque facial expression. And after seeing so many inaccurate impressions on SNL, to see someone that looks and sounds like Joe Biden a little bit, it's kind of refreshing to see. So that was a moment for me.
Yeah. Interestingly, I'm also going to go with a moment from the cold open, which we were not too hot on when we were discussing it, but it did have, as a whole, it was a little bit of a mess, but it did have those good moments. And mine is when he pauses Trump and he says,
just not to hear his voice for a single second.
and I was like, yes, it is. You know, we get so much news just in that 24-hour cycle. So I thought that was a good joke and something that, you know, as John was talking about in that sketch, almost a thing we wish we could hear Joe Biden say. So I liked that version of him, and I thought that was just a really fun moment. So John, what was your moment of the night?
The Drew Barrymore sketch. There is a little moment right near the beginning of that sketch where she nails the juvenile quality of Drew Barrymore's voice.
I am just like you, a boho free spirit, mommy, mother, movie star since I was 6.
It just really, really connected with me as something that felt very true to Drew Barrymore. And it was just a moment that impressed me. And it was a moment that said, oh, look, they trust Chloe to lead a sketch. And this is just, you know, her as a featured player, just this is her time on the show. And there's not a lot of featured players that are able to do that they just carve out their spot early on and they just plant their flag and they nail it every time. So, this little moment was just where I perked up and said, oh yeah, she did so good with the at-home episodes that she's in it. She's in it and they trust her. And isn't that a great moment for Chloe Fineman? And it was a great moment for me. So that's my moment.
Yeah, I think that's a great moment. You know, it's always good to see a featured player really step into their own.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome.
Nailed it.
Well, up next we have Best Sketch. Steve, you first.
I think Drew Barrymore's show was probably the most enjoyable piece. And yeah, I guess that's extra good praise for Chloe, where she basically was the sole talent aside from a couple of appearances from our new cast members and Alex as well. So yeah, a lot to love here. Clearly the impressions were amazing. Punky made a great debut in this, as did Dismukes as the cameraman. And yeah, when you start quoting Freddie Got Fingered, you know you're really going for the Emmy with this sketch. So there's just so much to love about it.
Yeah, and I'm going to agree with you. It was the highlight of the night. I think it's rewatchable many times over. Great impressions. Really enjoyed it. John, are you going to make it unanimous?
I am. The reason being, in our preseason cast, I said, I thoroughly expect the premiere to be heavily laced with COVID and politics. And I just know that that's not going to be what is going to connect with me. All I want is one sketch that sidesteps all that. And it's just lighthearted and goofy and charming and just fun. And it's just escapism from all of the other stuff that's going on in the world. And this was that for the night. Not only was it a great sketch for Chloe Fineman, so there's all of the joy of watching a featured player come into their own. So that it already wins on those terms, but all the more so that it was just some of the goofiest, funnest, most immediately enjoyable fare that doesn't challenge you in any way. It just says,
No.
Here, come have some goofy fun with these silly impressions. And it was bright and it just warmed my heart. And I don't think there was anything else in this show that tickled me as much as this one did.
Very good. Well, on that note, I feel like I know what direction this next category might go.
Mm-hmm.
But Steve, who's your MVP?
Yeah, MVP. I think I'll take the bait there and give it to Chloe.
Yeah.
Sure. She definitely has shown that she wasn't just a convenience for them during COVID,
Mhm.
during the lockdown. You know, it was easy enough to say, okay, we're going to have to do some at home produced stuff. Chloe pretty much made a name for herself doing this. We can trust her with a little bit of that. But now we see that it's spilt over to studio efforts and working on green screens with the whole crew behind it. It really bodes well for her career wise on the show that they're continuing to give her these vehicles, even though it's now no longer just the easy choice because they have the resources back and they're still doing it. So it's great to see. And I think this is the season where we see Chloe do amazing things and becomes, a lockdown.
Yeah.
I hate to use that word for something else than what it's normally
Yes,
used for.
It's a loaded term now.
A
we
lock
understand.
in. We'll say a lock in.
Yeah.
There we go.
A
That's
shoe
better.
in. Yeah.
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 Give her a shoe.
Yeah, I'll give the MVP to Chloe as well. That sketch was incredible. And, how rare is it to see someone get to do 3 impressions in one sketch? That's especially not in just a impression wheel sketch.
Yeah.
Mhm.
She owned it. It was incredible. Best sketch. It was her sketch. She gets the MVP.
She do.
John?
Should I just
No
talk
pressure.
about Chloe Fineman for a couple more minutes? Yes.
Why not?
She's the MVP. She brought joy into our living rooms. She, like you guys said, she's showing that she's planting her flag and that the stuff that she was doing on the at-home editions, people took notice, and it's obvious that there's trust there now. And she really brought that one home. What else is there to say that we haven't already said? This was a great showing for Chloe, and I'm just always so happy to see a featured player get a moment like that. So MVP for me.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's rate the whole show on a scale of classic, great, decent, weak, or train wreck. How would you rate this episode, Steve?
I'm going to give it a decent. There's a lot of elements working against it that maybe didn't allow them to make the best show the very first time with all these new rules. Definitely more rules than a game show. Not to mention the presidency. So you can't really fault them, but I don't think I should pull punches and say, given the circumstances, I should give them a classic because, no, we're not going to get into that habit. It needed some work, and I'm sure that we'll be giving better ratings somewhere down the season when they learn to thrive in this new restricted environment. They just need to work at it a bit more. So still not a train wreck or a poor episode by any means, but I don't think it would be fair to give them anything more than middle of the road. Keep it at decent.
Yeah, my initial reaction was decent. And on the rewatch and on the review, I was thinking maybe it could be great. It had more going for it than I initially felt like it did. But I'm going to stick with decent. Because, it had some stuff working. It had some stuff not working. Just overall, very hit and miss for me. And there's definitely something to be said with my expectations for the show. I was really excited going into it. We didn't really get a capper for last season. I felt like we were going to have a lot to say and a lot of stuff going in. So I was feeling a little not let down, but it didn't quite meet that expectation that I had. So I think that's going into it to make me say decent. John, how are you going to rate it?
coming into it, I was flirting with weak. I felt the cold open really needs some, like some solid retooling to find its voice. The monologue, I was expecting really great things from Chris Rock. He's solid stand-up. He knows how to deliver. He knows how to work the stage. He has 30 years worth of material to draw on. So I was really surprised that it was as heavy-handed as it was. And I didn't feel like that's the greatest way to kick off a season premiere in an era where the best thing SNL could be is a pleasant distraction. So why does SNL feel that it needs to be one more voice in a cacophony of voices right now? Like, I get it, like have the debates and, have Weekend Up, there's places to talk about, the social issues of the day, but why load up so much of the show with it? That was the biggest thing that continued to pull me back from really investing in the show. So those were the things that I was struggling with. And unfortunately, right up to Weekend Update, it was pretty relentless in that way. With Chloe Fineman kind of being the bright spot. So I really struggled with that. Now, Steve made a good point that, this is their very first outing with a whole lot of cards stacked against them. And so for that, again, you don't immediately be like, well, it's a classic because this is something people will be talking about forever. Their first episode back in the midst of COVID, and like there's a story there, but you still need to have a solid episode to be able to make that argument. I don't feel like we quite got there. So I'm really, really torn. Like, how generous do you want to be? Because it is the premiere and they do need time to ramp up, and premieres are always shaky, even under the best of circumstances. You can always tell that they're shaking off some cobwebs. So there's a whole lot feeding into this. And I gotta say, for all of it, I still fall back on the weak side of the line because I personally think it was a misstep for the show to feel like they need to do what everyone else is doing and be super duper heavy on saying, yes, here are all the issues that we as well are passionate about. And I don't think anyone was questioning whether they are. and so I just really feel like a lighter touch could have helped this episode to soar a bit more. So I am erring on the side of weak. Final answer.
All right. Well, it is what it is.
Oh, one other thing. Sorry, before we call it a night. One thing I do want to applaud is that watching this episode, it felt like watching SNL. And there was a question mark about whether what ended up on the screen was going to look and feel and be true SNL, or was it going to feel like SNL light? Was it going to be so heavy on pre-tapes that you just kind of feel like is this it loses some of the specialness of an SNL production? I didn't get that. It still felt like SNL. So for them to be able to walk that line of being able to get enough production talent and resources in the space to be able to pull off the show, I give them super duper high marks. The show suffered in a few ways, and I feel like they were things that could have been sidestepped, but it wasn't that the show didn't look great. And it wasn't that people weren't on their game, aside from, some camera, switches that could have been tightened up. But for the most part, it looked like really solid SNL. And I do want to let them know that I totally respect how tough that would have been to pull off this week. And I just hope that as they go down the road and they're able to get more comfortable in the space and doing what they're doing, that hopefully, the writing and the tone of the show catches up and they find a better balance on how to deliver what I hope is a more fun and lighthearted show down the road.
Well, here's hoping.
Yeah. Okay. I've said my piece.
All right. Well, that's a wrap. Thanks to Steve Finn and John Murray. And thanks as well to our most generous patrons, Sam Bowers, Neil Weinstein, Justin Gardner, Carissa Eubank, and Brian Clark. If you're enjoying our show, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whichever app you prefer to listen on. Your subscription helps us grow, and your support is greatly appreciated. We'll be back in 1 week to cover SNL's next outing with host Bill Burr and musical guest Morgan Whalen. But until then, this has been episode number 116 of the Saturday Night Live Afterparty podcast. I'm Catherine Coleman. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.